This video is based on the knowledge of Aristotle, one of the greatest thinkers in human history. A philosopher of reason, ethics, and character formation, Aristotle doesn't invite us to escape the world, but to face it with clarity. We live in an era where the mind is constantly fragmented, overloaded with stimuli, pressured by unattainable ideals, and driven by endless comparison. We want to grow, to change, to break through our limits, but most of us don't even know where to begin. Aristotle teaches that the path does not lie outside. It lies within, not in motivational shortcuts, but in the real construction of virtue, clarity, and self-awareness. For him, self-knowledge is not a spiritual option. It is a rational and ethical discipline, without which no human being can live fully. In this video, you'll discover 7 practical and transformative lessons from Aristotle on how to understand your mind, strengthen your reason, and overcome the limits you've built or inherited without knowing. So if this resonates with you, comment below. I choose to become who I am. Let's begin with the first lesson. Lesson 1. Knowing yourself is an act of responsibility, not vanity. Most people associate self-knowledge with something abstract, mystical, or emotional. But for Aristotle, knowing yourself is an ethical duty. It means understanding your role in the world, your strengths, your vices, your tendencies, so you can act with real freedom and not just by impulse. For him, ignoring your own mind is not innocence, it's irresponsibility. Because those who don't understand themselves repeat mistakes. They act blindly through passions. They confuse pleasure with good, freedom with escape. Aristotle believed that reason is the tool that makes us human. And for that reason, a life unexamined, unreflected, is a life that strays from our very nature. The mind that doesn't know itself becomes its own prison. You may be trapped in old patterns, automatic reactions, inherited desires, thinking you are in control. But without awareness, there is no choice, only repetition. That's why Aristotle's first lesson is clear. Only those who know themselves are free. Self-knowledge is not a luxury. It is the foundation of any true transformation. Lesson 2. The mind is shaped by the repetition of your actions. Aristotle stated that we are what we repeatedly do. We are not defined by isolated intentions or inspired moments, but by the habits we sustain day after day. This means the mind is not something fixed. It is a process in constant formation, shaped by the patterns you feed, the thoughts you nurture, the behaviors you repeat, the decisions you reinforce. Every action, no matter how small, either strengthens or weakens your internal disposition. Procrastination, for example, doesn't appear out of nowhere. It's the result of a series of permissions you've given yourself until they become automatic. The same goes for discipline, focus, or courage. The mind, according to Aristotle, learns through habit. That's why he saw character formation as a practical construction, not a theoretical one. If you want to change your mind, change what you do frequently. If you want to become mentally stronger, observe what you're silently repeating every day. Your character is not a fixed identity. It is the result of what you train, even unconsciously. And the good news is, everything that was learned can be unlearned and retrained. Lesson 3. Emotions are not enemies of reason, but they must be educated. Unlike what many believe, Aristotle did not view emotions as weaknesses to be suppressed. He wasn't advocating for a cold or indifferent life. Instead, he taught that emotions are part of the rational soul, and because of that, they must be educated, not eliminated. For Aristotle, feeling anger, fear, desire, or sadness is not the problem. The real problem is feeling without proportion, without context, without guidance, or letting those emotions dominate your actions. A balanced mind, he said, is not one that represses emotion, but one that recognizes it, understands it, and directs it wisely. It doesn't deny what it feels. It governs what it does with what it feels. This idea is fundamental for anyone seeking to overcome inner limitations. Many believe they need to become overly rational to evolve, but in truth, what they need is to integrate emotion and reason in a wise, conscious way. Because there is no virtue without feeling, but also no emotional freedom without rational discernment. Aristotle taught that the virtuous person is not the one who doesn't feel, but the one who feels at the right time, in the right intensity, and for the right reason. That is true emotional maturity, not the absence of feeling, but the ability to channel what you feel with clarity and intention. Lesson 4. Without clarity of purpose, the mind becomes lost. Aristotle believed that everything in nature has an end, an intrinsic purpose, and for human beings, it's no different. The mind needs direction, not in the form of shallow goals, but of existential clarity. When there is no understanding of what you're truly seeking, the mind begins to scatter. You live reactively, responding to external pressures, temporary impulses, or comparisons that have nothing to do with who you really are. This scattered mind spends energy on everything except what truly matters. It confuses motion with progress. It chases results, but lacks meaning. For Aristotle, to live well is to live according to your rational nature, and that demands reflection, self-knowledge, and a clear sense of purpose. Purpose doesn't have to be grand, but it does have to be conscious. You need to know what you're building through your actions so your mind can work with you, not against you. When purpose is missing, anxiety often takes its place because the mind senses that life is being wasted even when everything looks fine on the surface. That's why Aristotle invites us to stop and ask, what am I truly pursuing with the life I'm living? The answer might not come immediately, but the willingness to seek it is already a sign of awakening. Lesson 5. True balance is not passivity. It is active self-mastery. Often when people speak of balance, they imagine a kind of emotional neutrality, a detached or even indifferent posture toward life. But for Aristotle, balance is not about stillness. It is the result of active mastery of the soul over itself. He called this moral virtue and explained that it always lies between two extremes, excess and deficiency. Even courage loses its value if it turns into recklessness, and prudence becomes weakness if it turns into fear. A balanced mind, according to Aristotle, is one that has learned to regulate its impulses through reason, not through repression, but through understanding. Balance is not a gift, it is a conquest. It is shaped by training your perception, your reactions, your choices. It is the fruit of repeatedly making conscious decisions until those decisions shape your character. That's why he said that virtue is in the middle, but not a passive middle. It's the precise point where action is appropriate to the context, the moment, and the greater good. Anyone seeking real balance needs to understand that it demands inner vigilance, not to control everything, but to avoid being dominated by anything. This is the kind of mastery that unlocks your potential, because when you govern yourself, circumstances stop being threats and become spaces for deliberate action. Lesson 6. Developing reason is the highest act of freedom you can practice. For Aristotle, true freedom isn't doing whatever you want, it's acting according to reason. The person who lives driven by impulses, external opinions, or disordered desires may look free, but in reality, they are at the mercy of forces they do not control. A mind that hasn't developed its rational capacity lives in servitude. Servitude to repetition, fear, external influence, unresolved emotions. That's why Aristotle saw the exercise of reason as the highest expression of human nature. Through reason, we make wise decisions, recognize what is good, guide our habits, and educate the soul. Even more, it's through reason that we create inner autonomy. The external world may change, challenges may arise, but the rational mind remains capable of thinking, choosing, and acting with coherence. This is what separates illusory freedom from real freedom. The first depends on circumstance. The second is born from within. And to develop reason is not to memorize ideas. It is to cultivate reflection, intellectual honesty, and the willingness to confront oneself and seek what is true, even when uncomfortable. If you do not train your reason, you remain a prisoner, even if you live as if you were free. The liberated mind is one that knows itself, regulates itself, and is guided by principles it has consciously chosen, and that no one can take from you. Lesson 7. Happiness is not instant pleasure. It is the realization of human potential. Unlike popular belief, Aristotle didn't define happiness as pleasure, rest, or personal achievement. For him, true happiness, what he called eudaimonia, is the result of a life lived in full expression of our highest potential: reason, virtue, and self-awareness. In other words, happiness isn't about what you feel in the moment, it's about who you are becoming over time. It's less about temporary emotions and more about deep, consistent construction. According to Aristotle, a human being finds meaning when living in alignment with their rational nature, when their actions reflect goodness, balance, and excellence, not perfection, but a real commitment to becoming better than they were yesterday. This kind of happiness is not easy. It demands discipline, effort, correction, and constant inner work. But it is solid. It doesn't depend on luck, others, or external circumstances, and most importantly, it is self-sustaining because it comes from something under your control: your choices, your habits, your inner alignment. For Aristotle, a well-lived life isn't measured by how much you have, but by how much you flourish. And that flourishing begins the moment you choose to live intentionally and no longer on autopilot. Happiness, then, is not a reward. It is a consequence of a life built on clarity, virtue, and conscious presence. Aristotle did not speak to impress. He spoke to form, to shape character, mind, and soul through the practice of reason, observation, and virtue. You've just explored 7 lessons that aren't abstract ideas. They are practical tools for understanding yourself with more clarity and for dismantling the limits that were either imposed on you or that you built over time without realizing it. He believed that there is no real freedom without self-knowledge, that an ungoverned mind turns a person into their own enemy. And that happiness is only possible when you stop living by impulse and start living by reason. This reason is not cold. It is clarity. It is the light that separates what you feel from what you choose to do with what you feel. So if any part of this video spoke to you, write in the comments, "I choose to become who I am." Share this video with someone who needs direction, not just motivation. And if you want to keep going deeper, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Remember, you are not stuck because you're weak. You are stuck because you lack direction. And Aristotle shows you exactly where to begin.